Hello there, boys and girls. WhatCulture Wrestling's Adam Cleary here. And ahead of the WWE draft, WhatCulture has reached deep into the box marked presenters and pulled out the two most random wildcard combinations it could possibly think of for your news today, because I am joined by none other than Halloween Hamflet himself. Say hello, Michael.
Good morning. I am indeed drafted on the supplementary thing after the main show, just through whatculture.com.
Well, that'll be fun for everybody, especially me and you. So coming up on today's story, we have injury updates on both Finn Bálor and Kyle O'Reilly. You will remember some news circulating around after their match at TakeOver. But also, there's been two big returns at TakeOver. We'll tell you about them. Natalya has been training a mystery wrestler. Triple H has said all his usual spiel on the post-TakeOver conference call. And, of course, a WWE legend is open to returning. But who? I will tell you. But that's not even the best story we've got, is it, Michael?
It is not. NXT on their TakeOver 31 special last night announced that Halloween Havoc will be making its long-awaited sort of return, this time to television on NXT. It's going to take place on October the 28th. It's going to be hosted by Shotzi Blackheart. It's going to be full of all that usual spooky stuff you like. This is actually the first use of the Halloween Havoc branding since 2000. WCW had it for well over a decade. Eric Bischoff said it was his favourite WCW thing. It follows, you know, the likes of bringing back the Great American Bash early this year, Starrcade for house shows. AEW got involved. They did Bash at the Beach on television in January 2020, which might as well have been 15 years ago. There is a nice sense of excitement and buzz around this. As somebody that wants to still see the gold rather than just the black of the current NXT product, it is nice to see them being proactive rather than reactive. This can't be accused of being counter-programming. They have announced it a month in advance. They applied for the trademark in 2018. This feels a long time coming, and everybody seems nicely buzzed for a change about something to do with NXT.
Yeah, like there's a lot of goodwill going to be coming off the back of that TakeOver show, because it was broadly very, 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 very good. And I think if NXT needs to have learned one thing from the Great American Bash, it's A, announce this stuff ahead of time so it doesn't look petty, and B, invest more than a solitary giant sticker for your branding. I didn't know the Shotzi Blackheart bit. I hadn't actually caught that this morning. That's great, because she's crazy, isn't she? So that'll go along with the Halloween theme very nicely. She wears black lipstick, and as far as Vince McMahon knows, that means spooky, I guess. No, I'm glad for this. I'm not one of the WhatCulture contingent that is either old enough or wise enough to fondly remember the latter days of WCW. So this doesn't it doesn't prick anything in me particularly well, but still, I've heard of Halloween Havoc, and I love a pun, and I love Halloween, so I'm absolutely buzzing with this. But in scarier news, we basically Hamflet, you don't know this yet. We're always trying to do the worst possible link between these stories as we can. So in scary news, because getting hurt is scary, you may remember that following their main event at TakeOver last night, some news did circulate around, unconfirmed at the time, that both Finn Bálor and Kyle O'Reilly had picked up injuries in this match. Now, of course, that sends a shiver down your spine. Get it? Because it's scary. That's part of the link here. Not least, of course, because Finn Bálor does have history with injuring his shoulder after particularly good matches, but the news is apparently not quite as bad as first feared, unless you're, of course, Kyle O'Reilly, who has broken lots of his teeth. He's apparently been taken to a local medical facility, a real one this time, in order to have that looked at. Meanwhile, Finn Bálor is having a CAT scan to determine if he's suffered potential facial fractures. Now, that sounds terrible, but potential facial fractures just sound like they're going to make you less pretty, not make you less able to live, which I suppose is the good news here. Like, none of these sound like long-term injuries which could keep them out for a while, merely some cosmetic stuff, shall we say, with both the teeth and the face being broken. But I will say, take this with a pinch of whatever for the minute, because as yet, none of these have been confirmed by WWE. We'll wait to hear more, probably by next week's episode of this. Next week? What time is it? This week's episode of NXT. I've been asleep for 3 whole days. This is good news in the gentlest possible way you can say good, I think, because obviously you don't want them to get hurt, but also it doesn't sound like they're going to be injured.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anyone can afford cosmetic damage and not even seem damaged by it, it's Finn Bálor. He's got that to spare. It was really bruising and really brutal, and this is going to be the upshot of a match like that. Both were bleeding, Finn Bálor especially. Fingers crossed them both, not least because the brand itself could do with not having the second champion in a row, picking up an injury while wearing the title, and again, presumably throwing out loads of booking plans. It's all jaw stuff. It's very similar to the stuff they talked about Drew kayfabe having on television. Finn might have picked that up for real. So fingers crossed it's nothing too serious. But from possible departures to returns on NXT last night, we had, after the Io Shirai and Candice LeRae match last night, which I think actually outperformed the men's match just a little bit. We had two surprising returns delivered in very different ways. Toni Storm returned to NXT. I say return, she's obviously more familiar with the NXT UK crowd. What little of that still exists. So this has got to be seen as a promotion for her to be moving across to NXT full time. There was heelish overtones to her delivery. There was sort of covert threats to Io Shirai in her title. She didn't have the plaster on her face anymore. So there could be an indication that maybe she's, turning heel a little bit. However, the bigger news arguably was the unknown insurgent for those that, and now we'll read this utterly now pointless WhatCulture article that I wrote last week. You will have already had this spoiled for you. But Ember Moon was the one on the bike, the one who'd been looking longingly at that NXT championship. They'd been very careful not to gender the belt or indeed the person wearing the bicycle helmet. And a lot of people assumed it was Bo Dallas, or they were looking to Samoa Joe, Bobby Roode. And instead it was Ember Moon. I'd say a pleasant surprise all the way around. She looked absolutely thrilled to be back. We can assume that she is injury-free after some hard knocks over the last couple of years. And who doesn't want to see Ember Moon versus Io Shirai and the countless others in the division? It's a division that was already stacked, and it only feels more exciting that they are clearly front-loading with what they know they do best.
Yeah, it's quite amazing that both Toni Storm, who, was given one of the biggest pushes I think I've ever seen WWE give a woman when they put the Mae Young Classic on it, and the NXT UK Women's Belt not long after it was brought along, basically put her on that Evolution show out of nowhere pretty much, and then gave her that kind of spotlight. So that's great news. But Ember Moon getting out of the division is sensational. I struggle to get my head around the fact that you now have Candice, Io, technically Mercedes Martinez. We haven't heard if she's definitely moved over full time. You've got Rhea Ripley. You've got everybody else on that. You had Tegan Nox up until very recently, but now Aaliyah has had the most TV time of any woman on this brand, and yet we're stacking the top of the card heavier and heavier and heavier. I'm delighted with this, by the way, although I have to say, I did see that championship belt and assumed it was Bo Dallas or Bobby Roode or somebody like that. So I'll be checking that prejudice at the door going forward. But no, this is more good news, I think, for a brand that doesn't exactly need its women's division strengthening. But if you're in a position when you can strengthen it, when your competition is still floundering a bit to really get it off the ground, I mean, why not? I personally think NXT should just be a women's show. Now there aren't any. Now that Kyle O'Reilly, Finn Balor's finished, there is no stories on the men's roster.
AEW have obviously looked at NXT and thought, we have to do what they're not doing. And NXT might as well flip that now and say, well, they can't do that, so let's just do more of this.
Oh, trying hard, are you? Well, how about we add Ember Moon? Anyway, from women to women. Natalya has been on... See, very good. Natalya has been on Twitter in the post-glow of NXT TakeOver, and she dropped a cryptic little clue about something which has, as you might imagine, got the internet going, oh, I wonder if it could be X, Y, and Z. Now, I'll read the tweet out, Michael Hamflet, and you can tell me whether or not this pushes any buttons for you. Finished a wrestling practice in our ring with TJ Wilson, or Tyson Kidd to you and me. Ran our practice with Dr. Tom Pritchard. Man in the middle drills. Forgot how much I hate those drills. So much fun. ... Wish I could tell you who I trained with. Hands clasped together, winky face, women's wrestling emoji.
Ooh.
What's that, Hamflet? Ronda Rousey? Well, the internet certainly thinks it is. A number of names have obviously done the rounds with this. Members of the Mysterio family, Melina, amongst others. Tessa Blanchard has been mentioned, and Ronda Rousey. Now, of course, I'm just going to put this out there. Obviously, Natalya knows exactly what she's doing with this. She's being very cute. She's trying to wind people up. She's trying to create a story where perhaps there isn't one. But Natalya can talk about who she trains with. She can talk about who she wrestles with. She's under no obligation to not tell you that unless she is under instruction not to tell you that. And the only company that could put that level of pressure on somebody is, of course, WWE. And they do like to keep their returns and their reveals and their whatnots as secret as possible leading up to when they happen. So why not go overboard with this? Why not say it's Ronda Rousey?
It's the most thrilling outcome, isn't it, as well? We saw that it was Natalya that got Ronda through those early hard yards on the house show, full of praise for they openly acknowledged their friendship on television. It's possibly, arguably, a step for Natalya anyway into a coaching role that she's likely to one day assume full time in WWE. I don't want to burst anybody's bubble, but what if, for example, she was just helping Lana get better, and they didn't want to say that because almost by advertising it, it makes it less exciting than it is. It would be lovely to think of a Ronda Rousey or a Melina or something like that. I guess for Rousey specifically, all has gone quiet on her, what was it she called at the time? The impregnation vacation?
The impregnation vacation.
That has gone quiet of late. Obviously, we wish nothing to the best to that weird romantic like Trish she's got with her husband. But
they're really weird, aren't they?
Fingers crossed it is Rousey, because I mean, what a year it was. We'd do it all over again, wouldn't we, if we could? As would Triple H, who had absolutely tons to say to a lot of people that were just all too pleased to tell him how great his show was, which is why you can listen to a Fightful video rather than ours. They've got the whole,
which is why they don't invite us on.
We've got the whole conference call, so we had a listen through that to try and pick out some of the best bits for you this morning. There was some pretty cool notes. There was one about Ember Moon. She gave him a list of 12 opponents when offered the opportunity to come back to NXT. I love this narrative that whenever Triple H has a conversation with somebody backstage, like the NXT whisperer, yeah, Kevin Owens reckons he'd love to. Of course they would. They would all love to. She was absolutely buzzing. That smile was apparently not worked in the slightest. That broad grin as she came back. He said they've been discussing a return for a while. He too was excited about Halloween Havoc. Thinks it'd be a nice treat for the fans. He said that the ideas are fun to revisit when it's relevant and makes sense, which I think is coded for when Dad says he can. And he also spoke quite a bit about the Capital Wrestling Center. Obviously, this is the new name for NXT's take on this Performance Center, Raw Underground, Thunderdome hybrid that we saw debuted last night at TakeOver.
I didn't like that, actually. I thought it looked quite cool.
I think like there was issues watching live with the sound more than the visuals. I think this was sort of a more like they darkened the lights on the Thunderdome so it didn't feel as big and grabby as the main roster shows. The cage over the plexiglass was something. I guess there was a lot of discussion last night on why Vic Joseph had two stunt commentators in with him. Beth and Wade were Skyping in from home, and there were two people at the commentary desk and nobody seemed to acknowledge who they were. So I guess they were setting up shots or things like that. I'm not really sure. So it's obviously still a bit of a work in progress. He discussed the logistics of how to make it work. He noted, which I think was the coolest thing about this, that fans that were able to attend were all in separate pods. There was
that was cool.
1 meter sized like blockades or whatever it was that would allow the fans to be in attendance. That felt like the most future-proofing we've seen from a WWE or AEW show yet about how this could realistically work going forward. And he was also full of praise about Ridge Holland. He said it wasn't held against him when he nearly dropped Johnny Gargano on his head. He was pleased with how the end segment came with Adam Cole. And that seems to be consensus with the coaching staff as well. He also had nice things to say about the Garganos, and why would you not? And singled out Kushida, Swerve Scott, Santos Escobar, and Kyle O'Reilly as having great breakout performances on the show, and who really could argue with any of those.
Yeah, that's nice. I always enjoy reading about Triple H's media calls afterwards, because it's always, well, you know, and then loads of stuff that just makes good headlines. Anyway, from something that has happened to something that might happen, because a WWE legend is open to a possible return, according to a story that was on Fightful last night. That is Lisa Marie Varon, or Victoria, as you're more likely to know her. She was asked about whether she would consider returning to WWE as a possibility, and she said, I would consider it. So there you go. I mean, there's loads more to that quote. I could read it out for you here. Basically going into why she would come back, what she did last time, what she would want to do there. But basically, yeah, she's open to coming back. And in this age of WWE having pretty much everybody back if they so much as ask, or even in some cases just exist, that could open the door for a returning in the future. Hey, why not? Mickie James came back out of nowhere and got an entire second run out of it. So I would not be against Victoria. But just to go back to that original story, I do hope it is Melina, because she still has my hoodie from that show we did. It's not a scandal there. I'm not trying to imply anything. It was just cold, so I gave her my hoodie, and she took it. And I would just like her to come back, because obviously that makes it easier for me to pressure other people to ask her to give me that. But it was a nice hoodie, Hamlet. It was my show hoodie, and I was just trying to be a gentleman. Anyway, we've got no Twitter questions for you today, but we might do them a bit later on. Who knows if you've been good? My thanks, of course, to Michael Hamlet. Have you enjoyed your time on the news?
I have, actually. This was all right, wasn't it? Like, Murray and Wilborn talk a good game, but I think we've done okay stepping in.
It's not hard. It's not actually that, but it's not daunting, is it? Like, they make it sound like, oh, you guys got to be like top level presenting to be like on the news, but it's just stuff that happened, isn't it? You haven't got to know anything. It's just
they're going to bury us really hard tomorrow. It's going to be great.
Oh, they're going to watch this. They're both in bed. Anyway, let us know what you made of this all on the comments below. And of course, we get a like, share, and subscribe. Hamlet, they desperately want to get you on Twitter now. Where can they do it?
At Michael Hamlet.
Oh, sorry. I normally do this with Andy. I was waiting for the H stands for... H stands for Hamlet.
H has always stood for Hamlet, yeah.
The H stands for Handlebar Moustache. You can get me at Adam Cleary, Clery. The entire WhatCulture Wrestling family at your disposal at WhatCulture WWE. But in the meantime, this has been the news, and we'll see you for soon. No, bye.